8 simple rules for a better overall rank. I've decided this year to build a little list so that I can help my rank for next year. And I thought this list might be rubbish. So I'm bringing on a bunch of FPL managers to help me, guide me, and make the list a bit better. First up, we've got FPL General. Mark, how the hell are you, mate?
I'm very well, Dave. Good to be doing this with you. Good to be talking about lists because it's something I like to do myself. So I've been looking forward to this one.
This is actually something that I've wanted to do for a while, and it's also good to have you on first because this is pretty much just stolen from you. You did a podcast with Prince Abdullah and the FPL Surgery guys, and you were talking about the lists, and the Prince was very, very interested in it, and you guys had a good 10-minute back and forth. And right then I was like, you know what, I'm going to do that for next year. And then after I decided that I was going to release them as podcast episodes, I thought I'm going to have to get Mark on because he needs to know that I'm doing this and I'm taking his idea.
Nice one. Do you know what? I'm glad you're doing it as well because basically I was in a similar boat to you at this stage last season. I had a really bad season 2 years ago. So, during that summer, that's when I typed out the A4 sheet of paper, posted it up above my desktop in the office.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just nice to have it, especially when it comes to making your transfers every week. Just have a read through your kind of overall strategy, your golden rules. And it always kind of kept me on the straight and narrow, and it probably stopped me from falling into a few traps. So, yeah, it's something I think a lot of people should do.
Yeah, the only thing I'm worried about following this for a whole season is that I'm not sober the entire season. So hopefully this list can be drunk Dave proof as well, and I can maybe, take a picture of it and put it on my phone in case I'm out and about and I'm steaming.
It's never going to work.
All right, so we just get into it. You ready to go?
Good to go, yes.
All right, rule number 1. Take no hits. So that means as few as humanly possible. The obvious caveats being, injuries or suspensions, but hits should not make up for bad planning. So that's the aspiration. What do you think of that? Rule number 1.
Yeah, I think it's something I've always tried to do myself. I wouldn't ever say no hits because I think there's certain stages of the season where they can be very helpful. Let's say you're going into like a blank game week. You've only got like 6 players. I think, then a hit's only really a -2 rather than a -4, stuff like that. And then again, if you're going to captain a player as well, it's obviously easier to take a hit. But looking back on my season last season, I think I only took 4 -4s. Never took anything bigger. Never took a -8 or a -12. Don't know if I've ever taken a -12 in FPL. It just gives me the fear thinking about that. But yeah, I think the key, what you said, you mentioned planning in there with no hits. I think the key for me is always the way I look at it is I shouldn't have to take hits if I manage my squad well from week to week. So if I focus on my weakest link and don't ignore fires, then you shouldn't have to take too many hits.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to get at. Like, if I miss a player by 0.1 million because he goes up too early, I am very, very bad at just being like, you know what, I'll just take a hit and take this guy out so I can get the guy I want, instead of being like, you know what, fine, I'll just wait a week and get him the next week and do a double transfer kind of thing. I'm very bad and very impatient, and I think that's what a lot of managers like me do with the hits. So it's really good to hear from you, like, you know what, just leave that alone.
Yeah.
The thing that you said, the caveat about the blank game weeks, though, I disagree with that slightly. See, if I plan my blank well enough in advance, I should be able to not have to take a hit. So I think that's one of the things I'm trying to avoid, because last year I took, I think, a -8 before the doubles, that kind of thing, and it was just simply because I know it was a little bit messed up with COVID and everything, but I really want to try and get away from this, leaving it till the game week before, 2 game weeks before, and then start doing it. Obviously there's pros and cons about that, because you might have to mess your team up a little bit to get there. But
yeah, that makes sense. I don't think I know I said that about the blank game weeks, but I don't think I took any hits last week in blank game weeks. Looking back at my 4 -4s, every time I took a -4, I made 3 transfers. So it was always 2 frees and a -4.
Yeah,
so a mini
wildcard.
Yeah, so that kind of goes with my strategy of always trying to bank a transfer. And then if I need a hit on top of it, I always find it's easier to take a hit if you're making 3 transfers rather than 2.
Perfect. I think that's a tick then. We've got that one in the bank. We're both kind of obviously aspire to no hits, but you can take some if you really need to.
Exactly.
Perfect. Rule number 2, have a core team with price points. So this is based on something that Joe from the Scout really goes into a little bit, having a balanced price point from each position, defense, midfield, and attack, which means you can easily navigate to any player within 2 moves. And it's something that I've never really done. I kind of do it instinctively without thinking, but the last couple of seasons when I've started game week 1, I'll end up wanting a player and all my money's in defense. Remember, big at the back was a big at the start of last season, and I transfer and move money about and everything, and I don't really want to have to deal with that this year. So this rule is all about, flexibility from game week 1.
Yeah, I like this one. Like you, when it comes to price points, it's not something I've ever really focused on too much. Like you say, we probably do it without even really realising we do it. Mm-hmm. But I know Joe is a big man for it on Scout. I know a lot of other managers as well. Like before we got the player prices this season, you were seeing people tweeting what their structure was going to be. 4.5 goalkeepers, how much are we going to spend in attack and stuff like that. I think it can be helpful. But for me, I always rather focus on the players rather than the prices. So I kind of focus on which players I think are good value across all positions, and that kind of determines what my price points are going to be. So for me, it's kind of players come first, price points come second. But part of that, you've also got there, have a core group, have a core team. I like that as well. I like kind of identifying at the start of the season, even if it's only 4, 5, 6 players that you want to hopefully have really, long term, ideally from game week 1 to game week 38. So you're looking at probably Trent. This season I'm looking at probably Trent, Doherty, Salah, KDB. That's probably it. Probably 4 or 5. So I do like that. And then you can always remind yourself, once you get halfway through the season, once these guys start frustrating you, you can think, actually, I wanted to have these guys long term, so just be a bit more patient with them.
Yeah, exactly. My problem is I'll get to the end of the season and I'll have maybe one player that I started with, and it's just too many transfers and too many hits, especially for most of the people that you're going to be keeping all season are captain potential. And if you're messing about with that, you're always going to have a bad time, and it's something that I need to learn to kind of try and avoid, which is why I've got that there. And also, when you looked at like the top 10 managers from the last season, the season before, etc., they've always got like Vardy all season, or Salah and Mane all season. They just stick to the same people. You'll maybe find 9 out of 10 and the last guy, there's only one Maverick in the top 10 kind of thing. So although there is loads of different ways to play the game, you tend to find the core strategy is always kind of really, really up there.
Yeah. One thing regarding price points as well, just before we move to the next point, is I say that I don't really focus on it too much, but what I'm finding at the moment as we get closer to game week 1 is I'm struggling with strikers. So I think, I've been looking at, Mitrovic, Ings, Jimenez, kind of a cheaper forward line. But then I'm thinking, right, what if Mitrovic and Danny Ings, let's say, what if they start off quietly? It's quite hard to get up to a Kane or a Vardy or an Aguero. Mm-hmm. So it makes me think possibly maybe I should be going for a 9-5 or a 10-5 striker to begin with, because it's a lot easier to drop down than it is to jump up. So that that's why I'm more interested in the likes of Kane or Vardy than I'm more interested than I thought I would be, and I think it goes back to those price points and price structure.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same as you. I've got a 4.5, a 8.5, and a 10.5, and it's just in case Kane or Aguero goes off, or Werner or whatever. So yeah, I love that. I'm glad you said that. It makes me feel good. Rule number 3. Simple captain choices. No outside the box captains, sticking to your premiums, going with the majority, unless there's obviously some multiple options. City, Liverpool, Man United have good fixtures. What's your history with captains like?
Well, I think captaincy is probably one of the weakest aspects of my game. Especially last season, it was really poor. I think I don't have the figure, but it was less than 450 captain points, I think. I've seen people getting probably 550, 600. So it's something I really want to improve on this season. And I think for me, one of the things on my list this season, my new list, is that captaincy should be at the heart of all planning. So, for game week 1, I'm going to be looking ahead probably the first 6 to 8 game weeks and trying to pinpoint who are the best captains for that week and how can I have them.
I like that.
And like you, I want to keep it simple. So you're talking Salah, you're talking KDB, and probably Bruno. Maybe Aubameyang for the first 2 weeks, but I don't really want to overthink captaincy. You're paying the big bucks for these guys. You're paying the big bucks so you can captain them. And again, it's something I don't want to overthink. It's not something I overthink too much anyway. Previously, I would have always tended to stick to the big hitters for captains. I don't tend to take too many punts there, but I've just been on the wrong side of a lot of them. A lot of them are 50-50s. And, last season I was probably on the wrong side of a lot of them. So it's really something I want to improve on. But I think the key is looking ahead, 6, 8, 10 game weeks, look at all the fixtures, who's the best captain that week, and can I own that player?
We're both on the same page then. We aren't looking to be mavericks. We're not going to be laterizer when we bring in Martial and captain him on his hat-trick week. You know what I mean? That's not something that we can do unless you're so invested in one team you just know, and you like. And I'm not there. I'm never going to be that kind of guy. I'm too conservative as a manager.
I love the way Late-Riser plays the game, but me and him are probably totally different managers. I'm very boring, very conservative.
Yeah.
He is the maverick, and I think it's very important as well. Whatever kind of manager you are, don't try and be someone you're not. So I'm not going to go out. It's tempting for me. Last season, my captains were poor. It's tempting for me to say, right, I'm going to play like Late-Riser this season. I'm going to be really aggressive with captains. But I just know for a fact it won't suit me, and it won't suit my style of play, and it will probably go horribly wrong. So I'm going to stick to what I've done previously. Didn't work last season. But yeah, I think it's important not to, just be the manager that you are. Don't try to be. It's like I always think Sean Dyche doesn't set his Burnley team up to play like Man City. So, I'm a conservative manager, so I'm not going to try and play like Late-Riser, basically.
I love that we're getting a bit philosophical here. Stay true to yourself, FPL General. All right, moving on then. Rule number 4, wildcard with a plan. This is something that I'm going to assume is going to be a bit contentious when I talk to people, but basically the last 2 seasons that I've had, I've just wildcarded because I'm sick of my team, and I don't really think about the fixtures in which, the fixture swings that are coming that game week. It's only about I am sick of this team. So what I really want to do moving on is not having to wait and hold my wildcard till I'm sick to death of my team. I want to be able to be like, right, I'm either going to do it in game week 4 or game week 8, or I'm going to save it until the last possible moment. I don't want to just use it willy-nilly.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to add going into the season for yourself, especially if I think, like you say, wildcarding just because you're completely sick of your team is probably a bad reason. It's probably not a good enough reason to wildcard. You should probably, try and pinpoint, like you say, you mentioned fixture swings there. It's not something I've done too much myself, but I know a lot of people will do that.
Yeah.
If you've got a couple of teams, fixtures are getting trickier, and then you've got other teams where things are improving. That can be a very good time to get a bit of a march on rivals. But yeah, for me, wildcard, it's like last season. I think I'm going to go into this season not really. I'm not going to say I'm going to play at game week 4, going to play at game week 5. I'm probably going to keep. I think a lot of people will play early this season, which I think could be fine. But for me, I think I'm going to keep it. Number one, because I think a lot can change. Right up until game week 10, 11, 12. Transfer windows open for longer this year. People forget we're in a global pandemic as well. Surely there will be a few fixture postponements at some point. So I like keeping it. I think it's the most powerful tool you have. So going into the season, I'm going to have a plan to keep it. Not to use it early, but not to have a specific game week either when I would play it.
You left it right up until Christmas last year, didn't you? You kind of used it during that busy period. How did that work out for you?
It went well for me last season because I didn't use it until the last time I could use it, which was the game week 19 deadline. So exactly halfway through the season. The reason I kept it was because there was never a point before that where I felt I needed to make drastic changes. I was quite happy with my squad right up to that point. And even when I did play my first wild card, I think I only made 4 changes. And I even managed to mess it up. I got rid of Nick Pope for a couple of weeks and then fixed it on my second wild card. I think bringing Rashford in was the only real change I made on wild card. I think that's important. Whether wild card or a free hit, you feel like you need to make 10, 11, 12 changes, but you don't. You really only need to fix what needs to be fixed. So don't be tempted to completely overhaul your squad with a wild card.
See, that's perfect. That's exactly what I'm trying to get to. Like, have a plan to change the fringe players, keep your core, keep your captain choices. Make sure you're planning with your captain choices, and not going mental and being like, I hate my team. I had a really shit game week. I'm just gonna go for it in wildcard, which is what I tend to do. So yeah,
Yeah,
awesome.
exactly.
Perfect. Well, we're halfway through, and I think we've agreed on pretty much every point, which is not something I was considering for when we started this. It's pretty good.
Good minds think alike, Dave.
I love that. Right, so we're going to have a quick message from our sponsor, and then we'll be right back. Have you ever wanted to boast about your FPL rank, but find that no one listens to you? Do you love drinking liquid in some form of container? Then you'll love FPL Merch's FPL mugs. Pick the mug that fits your best rank, and watch as it amazes friends, family, and co-workers. You'll hear them say things such as,
"What a mug. Look at that mug over there.
and
He's that twat always talking about fantasy football."
go to twitter.com/FPL merch and click the bio Kickstarter link for more information on the winner's mug collection.
What a mug.
Rule number 5, template team to start. So this kind of mirrors that core team that we were talking about. But really this is highlighting that I want to have a core team plus differentials who have proven themselves in the Premier League. And I want a decent split between swords and shields. In the last season that I had, I felt like I did so well in 18-19. So you know what? In 19-20, I'm going to become this FPL mad scientist, and I started bringing in random people, and I was like, yeah, they're gonna do good. They all flopped, Mark. They shat the bed. So this year, it's gonna be a core team plus people I know can perform, and then waiting a few weeks to see who is actually nailed, like the Chelsea guys or whatever. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I like this as well. We're at risk here of agreeing on all 8 of your rules, so hopefully something will come up between now and the end that we don't agree on. But this is pretty much how I approach a game week 1 squad as well. I probably won't have any promoted players. Mitrovic, probably the only one who has a chance of making it. I probably won't have any new players to the league either. So Werner, Ziyech, these kind of guys. I usually like to give them a couple of weeks, see how they settle in the Premier League. See if they're going to start every week as well. Chelsea are signing a lot of players. So like you, have a team in game week 1 that I know are tried and tested FPL assets, who have good fixtures. I think game week 1 is a time not to overthink things. It's more important what you do during the season than what you do picking your game week 1 squad.
Yeah, it's easier to keep with the pack for a little bit and try and make your way out of it than chase the pack, because you'll never get it.
Exactly. Yeah. What I think my advice here as well would be, don't try and be a maverick in game week 1. Don't go building your team by selecting by ownership percentage. Don't go picking loads of guys who are 5% owned just because you think you can get off to a very good start. The guys who have a high percentage ownership have it for a reason, because of the best players. So don't try and be too clever. Yeah, you can have a few of them, of course, but just don't go overboard, especially in the beginning.
Yeah, and we're not saying I'm not thinking I'm gonna go into the app and put team selected by and just get the top 11. That's not what I'm planning on doing. However, I do think I'm going to have maybe 7 or 8 key players that everyone owns that have high percentage ownership, and then maybe try and get maybe 1, 2, or 3 fringe players. So what would your ratio of swords and shields be, do you think? What's your average?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I don't really think about when I'm building my squad. I never think of it as swords and shields. I'm just kind of focusing on which players I think can get me the most points. But I think that naturally, you naturally end up with a team, like you say, probably with 8 or 9 who are going to be pretty popular players. And then you've probably got 1 or 2 spots, for maybe your St. Maximins or your Armstrongs or your maybe your defender that not many other people have. But apart from that, it's going to be pretty, probably will be pretty template, even though I hate that word.
All right, okay. So template team to start then. You love a template for the win. Yeah,
probably becomes a template without me wanting it to become a template, yes.
Awesome, okay, good. All right, well that's 5 now in a row. Number 6, minimal goalkeeper transfers. So goalkeepers are for the long haul. Any transfers should be based on 10 game weeks or more than likely just using your wild card to change them if necessary. Don't jump on a goalkeeper transfer just because you have one free and you're not doing anything with it.
Yeah, I agree with us. Goalkeeper transfers should really only be made if they get suspended or they get injured. Last season, this was my approach as well. I said I don't want to make a goalkeeper transfer only during my wildcard, and that's what I did. I had Nick Pope from the start.
Mm-hmm.
I got rid of him on first wildcard around game week 19.
Yeah.
Got him back on second wildcard, which was game week 26, and then I kept him for the season. So I stuck to my plan last season. Didn't use any transfers on goalkeepers apart from when I used my first wildcard. And that's what I'll be trying to do again this season. Pick a goalkeeper from game week 1 that will do me up until the first wildcard, whenever that is. And then either keep that guy or get someone who's performing better and hopefully keep them for the season. But I think it's like every rule. You've got to be flexible. If you get a guy in from the start and he's absolutely useless, don't keep him just because that was your goal at the start. If he's rubbish, get rid of him.
Yeah, but unlike players maybe in attack or midfield where they have 1, 2, or 3 rubbish returns, so therefore you want to change them, maybe give your goalkeeper a lot more leniency, give him a couple more game weeks as opposed to just, you know what, he's not had a clean sheet in 3 game weeks, I'm taking him out. Yeah,
I'd probably want 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks of 2-pointers from a goalkeeper really before I would really consider shipping him out, unless his team are absolutely dreadful. If let's say if someone like, a lot of people are going to probably go for a Southampton goalkeeper or a Brighton goalkeeper. Let's say they start the season, 6 games without a clean sheet. That's when you need to think, right, is this guy actually going to be good value or not? You've got to kind of assess the team as well, what you think. Were they unlucky not to keep those clean sheets, or are they just shit, basically?
And who's in your draft right now, if you had to look?
Goalkeeper is going to be the last position I think I decide on. I think it's the hardest position this season. At the moment, Ramsdale, 5 million. Sheffield United is there. I think, obviously, we were hoping he'd be 4.5. That was never going to happen.
No, of course. He'd be in every single person's team.
Yeah. I just rate Sheffield United very highly when it comes to, their defence. And I think I rate Ramsdale very highly as well from what I've seen of him at Bournemouth. I think he could have a big future. So I think he'll be popular, and I think he could justify paying an extra 0.5 over some of the others.
Yep, he's in my team right now. Very happy with that. Well, it would be weird for us to disagree on any rules because it's pretty much based on your podcast, but let's give it a go, okay? So no team bias. So this is something that I don't have any difficulty with because I only support Scottish teams. So it's not something that I've ever considered a problem, but I thought I'd just write it in there because a lot of managers seem to have a little bit of bias in them, including yourself. I know we've talked about it before on Fantasy Weekly and other things. So how do you look at Manchester United in an unbiased way? How do you get around that?
Yeah, I think anyone who supports a Premier League team, it does make things a little bit trickier when it comes to your own team's players. Now, it's been okay for me for about 4 or 5 years because we've been pretty rubbish since Alex Ferguson left. So it was only really last season where I started to find it being a little bit tricky. But I think I'm pretty good at putting my biases aside. As a United fan, I could start the season with three Liverpool players. I could have 2 or 3 City players, City and Liverpool. So it's not something that affects me too much. But I do see it affecting others on social media. Even speaking with some of my patrons as well. Like a guy sent me a message today on WhatsApp. He said, I've just got around to making my first draft. And before I clicked into it, I knew there was going to be 3 Arsenal players because he's an Arsenal fan.
You've actually talked about this guy before, I think.
So I've been trying to talk sense into this guy for about 2 years now. I said, you're never, ever going to be a successful FPL manager until you take off your Arsenal glasses when you're building your squad. So yeah, it's very important to put your biases aside. I think it's harder for some people than others, but for me, it hasn't ever been too much of an issue.
That's good, actually. So that's what you were going to say if someone has a couple of players from their preferred team, is you would be like, you're never going to get to where you want to be without kind of looking at it unbiasedly.
Especially if you're a West Brom fan and you've got 3 of them.
I know. Any promoted team at all, having any player from a promoted team is so dodgy. We're never going to get a lunch from again. I feel like he's an exception to the rule.
I think the key on this one is if let's say you are a I'm trying to think of a team. Let's say you're a Wolves fan.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to game week 1, if you've got 2 Wolves or 3 Wolves players in your team, this goes for any team, just ask yourself the question, are they there because they're a good asset or are they there because I support Wolves? And that will answer your question for you.
Yeah, perfect. All right. 7 out of 7. Number 8. This is one that I've kind of tacked on at the end. I didn't really... It's hard to write 8 things when you're so good at FPL, Mark. But number 8, no mini league focus. So countering mini league competition is bad practice. If your goal is to win your mini league, then fair enough if that's all you care about. But if your goal is to have a higher overall rank, and that's what we're here, 8 simple rules for a better overall rank, don't let the competition influence you.
Very interesting you brought this one up, because this is going to be one of my main focuses for the new season.
Oh, wow.
What I think one of my weaknesses is, because I'm so heavily involved in FPL and I've got plenty of time to look at the website and stuff, I end up looking at mini leagues I'm in, and once I'm in a mini league, I'll click into a team, I'll look at their team, I'll look at their players, especially high profile managers that I'm in mini leagues with. And my overall goal each season is overall rank. I really don't care about mini leagues. There's no big mini leagues that I want to win. I don't play in any big cash ones or anything like that. Not that now that we're not allowed to anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
But, so when I'm an overall rank FPL manager, it makes absolutely no sense to be looking at other people's teams and looking at mini leagues, because it really means absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
That goes for my overall rank as well. So mini leagues and overall rank is something I'm going to try and avoid looking at as much as possible this season. Very hard to avoid your overall rank, because it's right in your face when you log into the FPL website. I wish it wasn't there, because I probably wouldn't look at it until the second half of the season. So for me, first of all, I'm not going to enter many mini leagues this season, and I'm going to ban myself from clicking into them and clicking into other people's teams as well, because it just clouds your judgment. If you look at 3 or 4 high profile managers, if they've all got KDB, you don't have them, you're going to want them. It happens whether you like it or not.
And it's not like they're wanting, it could be you find that they actually two of them transfer him out in the next couple of game weeks because they were thinking about it, and all you're doing is seeing their current team, not their current plan or their current thinking.
Exactly. So you're in that sense, you're always probably one step behind them, whereas you want to be one step ahead. And I think the best way to be one step ahead is just not to look at what they're doing and focus on your own game. Yeah. Let them chase you. Let them worry about you instead.
Yeah, send them your team every so often. Be like, look what I'm doing, and get the ball rolling. All right, well, that's 8 out of 8, Mark. High five virtually. That's amazing. Well done. Nice. Thank you very much for basically telling me that I didn't need to bring anyone on these mini-series and that everything's amazing. So we've went from 1 to 8 there, and there's only maybe 1 or 2 caveats that you've added. Is there any rules that I've actually missed that you think I should have in this list?
I think one of the biggest ones that helped me last season was the banking a transfer. So bank a transfer as often as possible. It's going to be one of my rules this season, again, like it was last year. So I always think an extra week of information plus 2 free transfers is a very strong position to be in. So, you have an extra week of information, plus you've got 2 free transfers when a lot of other people will only have 1 free transfer. Yeah. So that gives you an advantage going into that game week. You're a lot more flexible. Yeah. And I think it forces you to be more patient as well. When you pick a player in FPL, whether it be game week 1 or at any point of the season, you buy them for a reason, and you don't buy them for just 1 or 2 weeks. So by banking a transfer as often as possible, it forces you to give those players more time, and then they're probably more likely to reward you and get what you bought them for in the first place. So what I always do on a Monday morning or a Tuesday morning, whenever the game week finishes, the first question I ask myself is, can I bank a transfer this week? And if the answer is yes, that's what I will most likely do.
Yeah, and in that respect, it means that it would actually help with rule number 1, which is take less hits, no hits. Because if you're giving yourself 2 free transfers, then it means that you're going to be able to get to whoever you want. If you do have that core, flexible, price-based team, it means you can get to pretty much anyone. So yeah, that actually really helps. Rule number 9.
That rule number 9 does help with a couple of the other rules that you've already had, so it kind of works in tandem with those ones. There you go, Dave. You're guaranteed future 2020-21 FPL champion, Dave.
Yes.
FPL Dave, as long as he doesn't make any remarks that he shouldn't between now and next year.
Yeah, I'm glad you caveated it with that, because it's going to happen. Drunk Dave's going to get a hold of my Twitter.
That's what I was going to say. Drunk Dave is going to be your downfall at some point.
But you know what? You know what's the most annoying thing about Drunk Dave is that See, when I let him take over my team Friday night, I'm out with the boys and I've just decided to make 5 transfers or whatever. You know what happens? He generally does a decent job. And it's so annoying because it makes me think maybe I'll just let him do it more. And that's such a bad road to go down.
You know what? Rule 10 should be for you. There's a very good app I use called Stay Focused. So it allows you to block websites and block apps. So you can, what you should do is block the FPL website from Friday evening until Monday morning, and then Drunk Dave can do whatever he wants.
Whatever he likes doing.
But Drunk Dave will probably be able to, untick the blocked button as well.
Drunk
That's
Dave's
always the
crafty.
issue.
He's a crafty one.
If Drunk Dave wants in, he'll get in.
You know what I was thinking though? See, the reason why I was trying to analyze why he did so well, and I think the reason is because I do the transfers without thinking so much. Like when I'm sober, when I'm actually looking through and pouring through data and stuff, just like we were talking about before we started recording, like the amount of noise out there is so much that you kind of overanalyze and overthink. Whereas Drunk Dave doesn't do any thinking whatsoever. He just has like, you know what, I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to bring him in, and that's it. I'm taking him out and him out. And he does it within 5 minutes. Whereas I actually tend to, think for 5 hours, which is, I always end up poorly.
Exactly. I always think as well, it's very, there's such a big FPL community on Twitter, but you very rarely see very many of us in the top 50 or the top 100. And I think that's because we all overthink things. I think you probably find a lot of the people who are in the top 100 are people who don't put as much time in as the more hardcore do. And I think that's
and it pisses us off, Mark.
Exactly.
All right, well that's all we've got time for, man. Good little half hour there. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on, being my number one in this mini series. I appreciate it, man. I really do.
It's been a pleasure. I'll see you in the top 10K soon.
Is there anything you want to say before we go? Any plugs, anything like that?
No, just anyone wants to find me at the FPL General on Twitter is the best place to do so. Keep an eye out for the 59th minute FPL podcast, and just have a good season, everyone.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Cheers, everyone, for listening. Bye.
That was great.